Hello everyone and welcome to Irini's Crochet Corner. In today's video, I'm gonna show you how to do the In the Dawn motif. It's made up of a middle circular pattern, and then we work the corners as we go. The yarn that I'm using today is Kern Simply Soft. This color is autumn red, but actually in the tutorial I'm gonna use two tones of green, these two. Like with the color difference, it will be easier to see stitches as we do the corners. For the size of the hook, I'm gonna use 5.5 millimeter hook, and this motif uses around 11.5 grams of yarn. The size of the final motif from a corner to a corner, its length is 15 centimeters or around 6 inches. So let's get started. Grab your yarn and your hook and let's start working on the In the Dawn motif. So I'm gonna be starting with the light color of green, and to start we're gonna do a magic ring. Wrap the yarn on your finger once, and with the second wrap you make a letter X. Hold the yarn with your thumb, and with the hook you go under the outer loop and above the inner loop. Pull the inner loop out, make a twist and pull off the yarn and do a chain to secure your loop. Now we have the magic ring ready for us to start round number 1. Round number 1, we are gonna do 12 single crochet stitches into the magic ring. We'll go into the ring, pull a loop, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. One more time, into the ring, pull a loop, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through the 2. So we're gonna repeat until we get 12 single crochet stitches into the ring. Now I've made the 12 single crochet stitches into the magic ring. What I'm gonna be doing now is a slip stitch into the first single crochet to join. There we go. So this is what my round 1 looks like. Now I'm gonna chain 2 to start round number 2, but actually this first chain is to get us to round number 2. This chain, the second chain, this is the first stitch of my round, and we're gonna see how it works as we work this round. So what I'm gonna do for round number 2 is in each and every stitch, including that stitch where we did the slip stitch, we're gonna go in there and do a puff stitch. A puff stitch is done by yarning over, going into the stitch, pulling a loop, yarning over again, going into the same stitch, pulling a second loop. Actually this will be my 5th loop now, and then yarn over again and go into the stitch and pull the last loop. So now I have 7 loops on the hook. I'm gonna yarn over and go through all of them at once. This is a puff stitch, and then I'm gonna chain 1. We're gonna repeat the same sequence again into each and every stitch around. So a puff stitch, we yarn over, go into the loop, go into the stitch, pull a loop, yarn over, go into the stitch, pull a loop, yarn over, go into the stitch and pull a loop. So we go into the same stitch 3 times, and then we yarn over and we draw that loop or this stitch from all the loops on the hook. We'll chain 1. One more time, yarn over, into the stitch, pull a loop, yarn over, into the stitch, pull a loop, yarn over, into the stitch, and pull a loop. 7 loops on my hook, yarn over and pull through the 7 at once. Now chain 1. So we're gonna be repeating the same sequence of a puff stitch, chain 1, a puff stitch, chain 1 until we reach the end. In the last stitch, which is gonna be right here, we're gonna do a puff stitch, and then I'll show you what we're gonna be doing next. So here I am at the end of round number 2. I have 1 stitch remaining. I did my puff stitch right there. I chained 1, and I'm gonna do a puff stitch in the last stitch there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna chain 1 here, because if you remember at the beginning of the round I said that the first we chain 2. The first one is the stitch that will help us get to the height of round 2, while the second chain is the first stitch of the round, meaning that between this puff and the first puff, this is the chain 1 that I'm talking about. So all I have to do is go into that space right there and do a slip stitch. And this is the end of round number 2. Now to do round number 3, we're gonna chain 3. Again, the first chain is what will get us to kind of the height of round number 3, and these 2 chains, the second and the third chain, are considered the first 2 stitches of round number 3. What we're gonna be doing is we're gonna skip that space where we did the slip stitch. We're gonna skip the puff stitch, and we're gonna start working into that space right there. We're gonna go in there, draw a loop. So we have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and go through the first loop only. So I still have 2 loops on my hook. I'll go again into that space, pull a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. I'll yarn over and go through the 3 of them. Next, I'm gonna chain 2. Now into the next space, I'll go in there, draw a loop, yarn over, go through 1 loop only. We still have 2 loops on the hook. Go into the space again, draw a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over and go through the 3 of them. Then chain 2. Next space, in, draw a loop, yarn over, go through 1 loop and go in there again, draw a loop, yarn over and go through the 3 of them. Chain 2. So here I am near the end of round number 3. I did the stitches into the space, I chained 2, and then the last stitch will be right there in that space where we did the chain 3 at the beginning of the round. This is where we're gonna go and do our last stitch into the space. And then afterwards, we're not gonna chain 2 because we have already chained 3 at the beginning. So all we have to do is go in there and do a slip stitch. This is the end of round number 3. Now if you are going with one solid color for the whole motif, you're gonna continue without changing colors, but because I'm gonna introduce another shade of green, what I'm gonna do right now is grab my yarn. I'll just undo my slip stitch right there, and I'll grab my other color instead. I'll just adjust my stitches right there, and now we're ready to start working on the corners. So to start the first corner, we're gonna chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We're gonna turn our work to the other side. After chaining 3, we're gonna come into the first chain 2 space and do a slip stitch right there. Now we're gonna chain 1 and turn our work back. Then we're gonna do 7 single crochet stitches into that space. Seven single crochet stitches. Now we're gonna go on top of this stitch right there next to the space where we joined. We're gonna go in there and do a slip stitch. Okay, now we're gonna chain 2 and turn our work, and then into each of those single crochet stitches we're gonna do a puff stitch, then chain 1. So here I am working on my last puff stitch. And then we don't chain 1 at the end of this round, so we end with a puff stitch. Next we're gonna skip this stitch right there, and we're gonna go into that space and we do a slip stitch. Then we're gonna chain 3, turn our work, and start the last round. We're gonna skip the puff stitch and go into the space, the chain 1 space. We'll go in there, pull a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop only, go into the space again, pull a loop, and then yarn over and pull through the 3 of them. Chain 2, go into the next space, yarn over, pull a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, go into the space again, pull a loop, yarn over and pull through the 3, and chain 2. We're gonna finish with the same sequence till we get here, this space right there, and then I'll see you when we get to this point. So I'm gonna start my stitch into that space. and then I'm gonna chain 2, and then my last stitch is gonna go into that space right there between the chain 2 and the first puff stitch of the previous round. So I'll go in, pull a loop, yarn over and pull through 1 loop, go back in there, pull a loop, yarn over and go through the 3. And we're gonna finish our round with this stitch. Then we'll skip this stitch right there and go into the space and do a slip stitch. So this is what my first corner looks like. To start the second corner, if you remember, into that last round we did a chain 2 between each 2 stitches. So we're gonna go back into that space and do another slip stitch. Here's my second slip stitch, and I'll go on top of the puff and do a slip stitch. I'll go into the space twice to make slip stitches, and then above the puff, and then we reach our destination. This is where we're gonna start our second corner. I'll go in there again to do my second slip stitch. So to move from one corner to the other, you need to skip 2 spaces and reach the third. But in order to do so, you're gonna need to do 1 extra slip stitch after you join this last round with this round. You do 1 extra slip stitch. You slip stitch once on top of that stitch. Into the space you do 2 slip stitches. Above the stitch you do 1 slip stitch, and then into your destination stitch you do 2 slip stitches. Now we are ready to start the second corner. So I'm gonna chain 3, turn my work to the other side, find the next space right there, go in there and do a slip stitch, chain 1, turn my work and start doing 7 single crochet into the space. We're done. We go on top of the stitch right here and we do a slip stitch, then we chain 2, we turn our work to the other side, and we start doing our puff stitch row around. 1, 2, 3, finish my puff stitch, then chain 1. So here are my 7 puff stitches right there. Now I'm ready to join. The last space was here. I'm gonna join right there. If I have my counts right, I should be joining where the last round of the other corner has been joined, right here. So both of them are originating from the same space. Now to finish this corner, I'm gonna chain 3, turn around, skip the first puff stitch and go into the first space and start doing my special stitch right there. Then we chain 2 into the second space again, pull a loop, turn over, pull through one loop, go back into the stitch, pull a loop, and then finish the stitch, then chain 2. So I'm just finishing up here, chain 2. Don't forget where we do our last stitch. It's gonna be right there into that space, in and do our last stitch, and then into the next space right there we go in and do a slip stitch, and my second corner is ready. So what we did here to start this corner is gonna be repeated twice, 2 more times. So I'm gonna do with you the traveling thing until we reach the third space that we need to reach, and then sorry, it should be this one. So we are at space number 1, and then space number 2, and then our destination is space number 3. So before leaving this space, I'll go in there again and do another slip stitch, okay, right there into the top of this stitch. We're gonna go in there and do a slip stitch. Into the space we're gonna do 2 slip stitches. Above the stitch we're gonna do 1 stitch, and then our destination space we're gonna do 2 stitches of slip stitch, before we start our corner. Now we're gonna do chain 3, turn my work, find the previous space, slip stitch, chain 1, turn, and then start again with the 7 single crochet right here. So in the description box I'm gonna write a timeline. I don't know if that's what they call, so you can easily go back to the beginning of the second corner if you need to see the video again for what we do to do the other 2 corners right here. I'll do them off camera and I'll come back to finish it up with you. So here I am at the end of my 4th corner, and I'm ready to join. So I'll be joining into that space again, a checkpoint for us that the last row of each corner should be joined to this original circle where the other corner has already been joined. So each and every corner is originating, or each space, joining space, will have 2 corners joining into it. So this is what it looks like at the end. There we go. Again, if you wanna make it into one solid color, this is an example of one solid color right there. And if you want to do it into 2 or more colors, this is an example. Yeah, you can just mix and match the colors. You can start with a dark color in the center, or you can do with a light color, however you want to do it. And I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do. I'm also on Instagram. I'll put all the links in the description box. I've also started a blog where I post my written patterns there. So I'll put a link to the blog down in the description box as well. And that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.